Welcome to the Hermitage. We're most delighted to welcome you today to the very special exhibition from Galleria Nazionale dell'Umbria, housed here in the Nicholas Hall of the Winter Palace. This exhibition is going to give us an insight into a period of Italian art of the 13th and 14th centuries and its transition from the Gothic style to what will be called Renaissance. We're going to show you some of the most amazing masterpieces, and we'll be happy to welcome you to this exhibition. The first piece we're going to show you is a double-sided processional cross created by the so-called Master of St. Francis. It was created in late 13th century, and that was the period where most artists had conventional names, so it is not very often that the names were actually known to us. So Master of St. Francis created this piece, which is quite typical of the pieces used during religious processions in Umbria in the 13th century. It has traditional iconography with the crucifixion, the Virgin Mary lamenting Jesus Christ, and Saint John the Divine. However, there is quite an unusual feature here, down below at the feet of Christ, where we can see a tiny figure of a monk wearing a cloak with a rope belt, and he's pressing his cheek very tenderly to Christ's feet, suffering and feeling his pain. This monk is St. Francis, and after a recent restoration they were able to actually read the name of this monk, and he had been canonized in the early 13th century, and he had created one of the most influential monastic orders in Italy. It was the Franciscans, the mendicant order, so the begging order, and St. Francis himself gave up his worldly possessions in order to follow Jesus' life. And it's interesting that the artist decided to actually include this figure in the traditional iconography of a processional cross. And the artist, who is called the artist of Saint Francis, was somebody who worked for the famous basilica in Assisi, where most famous artists took part in decoration. The Franciscan order had tremendous influence on the religious life of Italy of this period, and most of the works of art in this exhibition were made either for the Franciscans or for the Dominicans. It is amazing, however, how emotional these figures are. Both the Virgin and Saint John and Jesus Christ and Saint Francis. It is through Saint Francis' prayer and ministry, it seems that the people could actually get closer to Jesus Christ. It is a way of emotionally engaging the viewer. In this exhibition, Galleria Nazionale dell'Umbria has brought to us a number of most famous names in the Italian art, and also not only painting, wood panel painting, but a very rare piece of sculpture that we're going to see now, due to the work of Arnolfo di Cambio. It's one of the most famous Italian architects and sculptors. The piece showing an old woman trying to quench her thirst is carved of a single piece of Carrara marble, and when we look at it, we are amazed at how emotional her face is. We see that she's very old, that she has wrinkles on her face, that her body is exhausted and she is desperately trying to get some water to drink. The piece carved in a very simple and almost modern manner, showing Arnolfo's knowledge of the antiquity. The story of this sculpture is even more unusual. Actually, Arnolfo was invited to Perugia to create a fountain that was to celebrate the access to the new aqueduct, the access of the citizens. And the fountain was decorated by a number of figures. But due to technical reasons, the beautiful fountain was dismantled just 27 years after it was created, and only 5 figures have survived. Now these figures, one of which we can see, are called Ascitati, that is the thirsty ones, because Arnolfo was amazing in the way he actually showed this very human emotion and the physical condition through his work of marble. In this exhibition, the Nicholas Hall of the Winter Palace, the biggest hall of our museum, now seems to have turned to a temple, to a church, a Franciscan or a Dominican church, and we have many beautiful Madonnas on display, one of which is practically the largest piece in this entire exhibition. And right now we're going to be able to name the artists, which is quite a rare case. Now this Madonna is due to Marino di Elemosina. This is the period where artists started to sign their works, and researchers were recently able to read the name of the artist on the sword of St. Paul's, on the hilt of St. Paul's sword. Now, this is a traditional type of Madonna representation, a large altarpiece called maesta. That means Madonna sitting in majesty, sitting on a majestic throne chair. Behind her, the angels are holding a beautifully decorated, richly embroidered cloth, and the baby, the Christ child, is taking a step towards his mother. In this piece, what attracts attention first and foremost are the colors. The beautiful color of Christ's garment, the lilac color of Madonna's dress, the cloth, the head cloth that covers her head, the beautiful design of the fabric that the angels are holding, the multicolored feathers in their wings that we can see on the left and on the right, and the way the artist actually marries all those colors in an amazingly rich and impressive composition. So this is truly a maesta, a majestic representation of Madonna, which was influenced by the works of Giotto in the way the baby is shown, and also was influenced by the work of another famous artist, not from Perugia but from Siena, Duccio di Buoninsegna. The altarpiece by Duccio is opposite this one, and we are now going to walk over to another part of the room, which is very beautifully designed, so there's a lot of space in this hall for everyone to enjoy the pieces of art. Now, Duccio di Buoninsegna, or Duccio, was one of the most influential names in Italian art, and this is also an altarpiece, the Maesta piece, that used to be a center of a polyptych composition. At this period of time, Ducci's career was at its peak. And the work here combines the strict features of the Byzantine tradition and the bold innovations. What is completely unusual here is the Christ's gesture. Look at the way he's pulling at the cloth that covers his mother's head, and he's trying to catch her attention. And we see how the artist treats the folds, the way they're folding in his hand, and the way the folds, the delicate drapery is actually covering the body of Christ child. Here, Duccio has used modeling under the chins of the figures, and it feels almost three-dimensional. There are also traditional things in this piece. For example, the way the naked feet of the Christ are shown. The legs are crossed as if at the crucifixion, and this is a traditional reminder of the future sacrifice. The background is richly gilded, which is also traditional for Byzantine icons. But another amazing feature in Ducci's composition are the angels. So here the angels look remarkably alive and animated, and they are actually leaning over the frame, the actual frame of the panel, to take a closer look at the Madonna and Child. So the elegant and charming lines of this beautiful composition are typical of Sienese style. And now we're going to carry on with one of the smallest pieces in this entire exhibition, and it is exquisite, as if it were a piece of jewelry. Little is known about this piece. However, it's probably the most famous in this entire exhibition, in this entire display. Now let's have a look at it. It's actually a very small piece of work, which means that it was a personal prayer image. The type of this representation of Madonna is called Madonna of tenderness, or Madonna with a lively child. This composition focuses on the quite unusual and animated pose of the Christ child, and here we can see that he is looking up at his mother's face, at the same time tenderly touching her chin. In this piece, the artist, whose name still remains unknown, focused on both the traditional composition and the quite unusual color scheme, with bright red garment cladding the Christ's body, and beautifully designed maphorium that Madonna is wearing, that stand against the gold ground panel. The gilding is excessive here, and it's actually a very complicated technique where gilding comes before the painting, and you can spot the tiny symmetrical punch marks. The punch marks pattern is very intricate here, decorating the halo of the Virgin, the background, showing the frame around the composition, and we can also read the letters in Greek, which stand for Mother of God. So this piece is outstanding in very different aspects, marrying traditional Byzantine approach and very personal attitude to this image. However, practically nothing is known about the artist who created it. So he is conventionally called Master of the Madonna of Perugia. And at the moment, there are only 3 works attributed to the Master of Madonna of Perugia. And hopefully, someday, the name his identity will be known. Right now, we are in the center of the hall, and let's find out where the pieces came from. They made a very long way from Umbria to St. Petersburg, and we can, for those of us who have never been to Perugia, there's a chance to have an idea of what the gallery looks like. So in this photograph you can see the National Gallery of Umbria, Galleria Nazionale dell'Umbria, and it is located in Perugia's main square, in the Palazzo dei Priori, the magistrate, which represented noble families that collectively governed the city. The 2 stories now house the displays of the gallery, which boasts one of the most fascinating collections of medieval art. The pieces were mostly acquired from the closed monasteries during the period of unification of the country. And a very large part of the collection has now traveled to St. Petersburg. We are also going to pay our respects to the patron saints of Perugia. There are wooden panels representing Saint Laurent and Saint Herculanus, the saints that were venerated by Perugians. Here on the left is Saint Herculanus, who was one of the early bishops of Perugia. Now the bishop here is represented in traditional bishop's cloak, and in his hands he's holding the model of the city. So this model is actually one of the earliest known depictions of Perugia's Piazza Maggiore. We can spot the bell tower of the St. Lawrence Cathedral and the chapel of St. John the Baptist. Now, on the right, there is on the second wooden panel, there's a figure of St. Lawrence, another patron saint of Perugia. He's holding a palm branch and a book, so the palm branch being the symbol of his martyrdom. Now the piece itself with these representations is double-sided and actually served as a choir screen or dossal. So it was a screen facing both the monks and the congregation, and the people would actually see this side looking at their patron saints. We are now going to shift from painting to a very exquisite piece of jewelry art, of which there are quite few here in this exhibition. But one of them is beautifully designed, and it also has a patron saint. Now we're looking at a piece that is called paten. Now, paten is a special plate where the bread was carried during the Eucharist. This pattern is made of gilt silver, and in the center there is an exquisite enameling work showing St. James the Elder and a pilgrim. What's interesting here is that we actually know both the names of the jewelers who designed it and the person who commissioned it, whose name was Giacomo, and that is James in Italian. So this is an example of somebody commissioning a piece showing his patron saint for his own well, to help him guide on his way. The piece miraculously survived the destruction of the church and was unexpectedly discovered in the middle of the 20th century, hidden away in the remnants of a closed church. Now we are going to proceed now to another piece which, of which we know not only the artist's name but also the name of the person who commissioned it. And we are now moving on chronologically. Here is a lavish and sophisticated composition showing the Pentecost. So the Pentecost is a Christian celebration taking place on the 50th day from Easter Sunday. It commemorates the descent of the Holy Spirit upon the apostles while they were in Jerusalem, as described in the Acts of the Apostles. It is also called Trinity Sunday. And the central role here, of course, is dedicated to the Virgin. And also to the event when the apostles were filled with the Holy Spirit, usually represented as a dove, and the little tongues of fire or flames of fire descending upon them. Now, obviously, this event scared and surprised the apostles, so they are shown all widely gesticulating and trying to understand this amazing effect. And this is quite an unusual iconography for this story. Every apostle is identified, so the artist decided to put their names on their halos. And we can see among the 12, the two are important to us. The one on the left, whose hands we don't see, so that one looking at us, he's Apostle Thaddeus. And he is the patron saint of the artist himself, whose name was Taddeo di Bartoli, that is Thaddeus in English. And another apostle is St. John. And St. John was the patron saint of a young man named Giovanni, who unfortunately had died before this composition was created, and it was his mother, widow Angelella di Pietri, who commissioned this piece, grieving her deceased son. And it is her that the artist represented, well, it is an allusion to her, that this representation of Madonna. The piece was actually designed to be placed in a burial niche in the family chapel of Angelella Pietri. We can actually read this whole story down here, where we can spot the names of Angelella Pietri and her son. So as we can see in this composition, Taddeo di Bartoli designed a very sophisticated thing, which is at the same time very personal, very human, and very emotional. And finally, we're moving to a very famous piece in this display here, which will show us the work by one of the last painters of the Gothic style, or the so-called International Gothic style, Gentile da Fabriano. He was the most famous artist to mark this period, and this is another Maesta, the Madonna enthroned. His composition here is looks like it's bejeweled. There's so many different details, so let's have a look at some of them. Now the Virgin Mary is sitting in something that looks like a flowery meadow or a garden. This is an allusion to the Hortus Conclusus, the enclosed garden, referring to the idea of the Immaculate Conception of the Virgin. She's holding baby Jesus in her lap, touching a pomegranate, the symbol of his passion here. Her cloak is decorated by what seems a real piece of jewelry, but it's actually a plaster cast piece looking like the sun, and this must be considered as a reference to the woman of the Apocalypse, the woman clothed in the sun, which the Catholic Church, medieval Catholic Church, identified as the Virgin Mary as well. There is a magnificent golden background here, very intricately worked, so that we don't see straight away, but we have to actually make an effort to see a whole host of angels rejoicing around the Virgin and Child. And in order to make those figurines, the artist had to punch them very it is a very complicated type of design, where you have to use a punch and hold it really perpendicular to be able to make those intricate garments and wings. Now, the style of this painting is generally referred to as Gothic style, International Gothic, because the figures are still somewhat elongated, and the artist focuses more on the elegance rather than anatomical accuracy. However, we can see modeling in the figure of Christ Child and Madonna's face, and some very delicate colors. This accumulation of details really makes this piece a work of very elegant art. And at the bottom of the composition, the part that's not survived so well, however, is very important. We can see the music score, which researchers managed to identify as a musical antiphon addressed to the Blessed Virgin Mary. It is Regina Caeli, the Queen of Heaven. The music used during the Easter season, and Madonna is represented here as the Queen of Heaven. So at the end of the medieval times, the Virgin, the image of the Virgin, had taken on extreme importance, and people believed that she was like a bridge that they could get access to Christ through, and that she was like an intercessor between mankind and God. So in this display, we can enjoy and share some of the most amazing interpretations of this theme of the Madonna. And it is a great privilege and honor to have this exhibition in St. Petersburg, especially that the works of this period are quite scarce in Russian collections. Thank you very much.